Hi there, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much if you watched my video yesterday, and thank you for watching this video as well. If you want to see more videos from me, go ahead and go ahead and subscribe below. Today, I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. So I'm going to talk about some of the good and bad books that I've read this year. So according to Goodreads, I've read 33 books so far this year, which is pretty good since my goal is 42. I'm more than halfway done with it. I did a blog post on this, so I'm going to link that down below. So if you want to know more about the titles and the authors of the book that I mentioned, click the link in the description below. I'm going to be referencing the posts so I can make sure I get the titles and the authors right, and I go in the correct order for the question. So if I look down at my phone or you see the light from it, that's why. Okay, so the first question here was the best book you've read so far. And so far, I think the best book that I've read so far has been, I'm always afraid I'm going to mispronounce it. I think it's Circe, is how I've been saying it. Circe by Madeline Miller. This is the first time I've read something by her. It was recommended in a list about fiction about ancient history. And in it, Circe is the daughter of a Greek titan and a nymph. She has two siblings. And she discovers that basically she learns about things like witchcraft and potions. They call it pharmaca in the book, where she can make potions to make things happen. And when this is discovered, out of fear, she is banished from her home with the other gods and mythical beings, and sent to live alone on an island. And it is about her life there. And the book was really good. I liked how it revisited a lot of myths that some of us have heard before. For example, I'm forgetting it. The man and his son who escaped with the wings, and his son went too close to the sun, and the wax melted, and he drowned. So it addressed characters and myths like those from Circe's point of view and what her involvement in the stories were. And I just thought that was a really interesting take on a lot of these stories. And then there was the best sequel you've read so far. I haven't read very many sequels this year. This is one I actually have, actually. The only one that I've read was Paralandra by C.S. Lewis, the sequel to Out of the Silent Planet, of course, which actually I also read Out of the Silent Planet this year as well, and I'm hoping to read the final in the third trilogy. This is the edition that I have. I got it at a used bookstore forever ago and finally got around to reading it. I wish it matched the edition I have of the other books. I'm tempted to get it in a different edition, so that they all go together, but I'm not sure if it's worth the cost. It was okay, but I didn't find it as gripping as the first one. I thought, for one thing, the first one had a lot more characters in it, a lot more creatures from the planet that they were on. And this one, you really don't learn much about the planet. It's more or less just not a retelling. Like the creation story happens again, and the main character has to ensure that it goes off without a hitch, because the villain from the first book is back, and he's trying to prevent the two the mother and father of this new race of beings on this planet. Basically, this planet's Adam and Eve. He's preventing them from finding each other. He's trying to talk the woman out of it. And the main character, Ransom, is trying to make sure that it goes better than it did the first time, is what it comes down to. And it didn't really interest me that much. I think part of it was we didn't learn very much about the planets. There weren't a whole lot of creatures from it. There was a race in the first book that had some really great characters that Ransom meets, and you didn't have anything like that. It was basically just the woman and a few others, who you didn't really learn much about. They were sentient and everything, but they didn't communicate very much, and they didn't play much part in the story. Um, so it wasn't bad, but it wasn't as good as the first one, I didn't think. The next question is new release that you haven't read yet but want to. And for this one, I put Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing by Lauren Hugh. And it's a collection of writings by the author, covering a lot of topics, but one of the big things that happened in her life is she was raised in a cult and then she leaves the cult. I stumbled across this, immediately put it on my Goodreads because I love reading books about cults. And then on Goodreads, I found out about some of the controversy that happened with this author. Apparently, she criticized the Goodread reviewers for not giving her 5 stars. And yeah, that's bad behavior on part of the author. And part of me was like, well, maybe I shouldn't support that. But another part of me is like, it's cults. I'm gonna read it. Let's just make our peace with that and move on. So I'm aware of the controversy, but it's not enough to keep me away from a book about cults. I'll be honest there. And then the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I didn't know very many of these because I don't keep up with new releases. I feel like where I haven't read very much over the last few years, I'm still trying to get caught up on a lot of books that are just kind of taken for granted by a lot of people, or that I've had on my shelf and never got around to reading. So I don't follow new releases that much, but I did want to answer this question. So I did a little bit of researching and I did find some that looked interesting. And the one that I read that looked most exciting was called The King of Infinite Space by Lindsay Fay. I don't know very much about this. But from what I understand, it is LGBTQ fiction. So based on the title, I'm guessing it's sci-fi. So that sounds really exciting, really good to me. Biggest disappointment. This was an easy one. I thought about updating it because I had a did not finish book that I could have put in here, but I decided since this is what it was at the halfway year point, I would keep it. But biggest disappointment was The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. I knew about it because it was super popular when it first came out. I think it was on Oprah's Book Reads, and I know that they made a movie out of it. So I'd always been kind of curious about it, even though I'm not crazy about romance. And I didn't really like the sound of it, but I read it out of curiosity. It was on my want to read list on Goodreads, and I didn't like it. I didn't think it was well written. I didn't like the characters. The ending wasn't good. Like it was, and I guess, some people don't like happy endings, but I do. Especially in romance. I want things to end well for the characters. If they don't end well, then at least I don't want them to end terribly. And this book just it didn't end well. It ended terribly for the main characters. And then the stuff about timelines and time travel just didn't make sense to me. It was all so much different from what I've read in other time travel books that I just didn't really get it. For example, the main character, or the main male character, because I guess the couple are both main characters, didn't have any control over when he time travels. Like, it just happens. Sometimes it's when he's stressed, sometimes it's random times, and that doesn't seem fun to me. And then on top of that, throughout the whole book, you get the idea that the characters don't have any kind of agency. Like, everything is predetermined, and that just doesn't make good reading for me. It's like, well, you can't change it because it's already happened, even though it's going to happen. I guess that's one of the reasons why time travel novels are so hard to work with, or so hard to write. But this was a big disappointment for me, and I think I even gave it a 2 stars on Goodreads. I didn't like it at all. On the other hand, biggest surprise was Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow. This covered the basically the whole Harvey Weinstein scandal. It was written by a journalist, Ronan Farrow, who was involved in part in uncovering this. And at the time, he was doing this feature piece about, it started out as being sexual harassment, but Weinstein's name kept coming up. And so he's kept digging further, but then he faced all kinds of resistance to it. And eventually the story got cut, and he was even let go from NBC. And I don't want to tell too much about it, even though, you know, this is real life, so I guess you can't really call it spoilers. But it was really interesting. Favorite new author, either debut or new to you. This was Madeline Miller. I've only read the one book by her, but I'm excited to read more. I'm probably gonna have to buy them. My library doesn't have any other books by her, which is too bad. But like I said, I want to read more by her because I did enjoy Circe so much. Okay, so newest fictional crush. I really haven't had any crushes on characters. Most of them really haven't, you know. I've read a lot of nonfiction this year. So you don't really, that doesn't really lend itself to crushes. The closest I could think of, and I feel stupid about this because I don't remember the character's name. If you've ever read any books by Edward Rutherford, you kind of know how his books lay out. They span thousands of years, and you're introduced to hundreds of characters, most of whom only are around for a chapter or two. Well, one of the characters in his book I really liked, and I can't remember his name. He was, the book was Princes of Ireland by Edward Rutherford. It's published under different titles in different countries, but the version that I read was Princes of Ireland. And he was a priest. No, he was going to become a priest at his family's parish. It gets this for the most part in this time in the second millennia. A lot of priests, especially local ones, still married and had families. It wasn't a controversy or anything like that. So originally he was going to take over his family's parish and be the resident priest there and stay at his home area. But then he decides to move away and join a monastery where he would have to be celibate in order to become a member. So he ends up doing that instead, basically like abandoning a life that everyone thought he was, there was a girl growing up that he liked, that everyone expected her to marry. He doesn't marry her, of course, because he goes and joins the monastery. He, leaves his family's area. He moves away from the parish everyone expected him to take over. So basically he not really abandons, but he leaves behind the life everyone expected for him to pursue his own passion. And throughout the character, throughout his storyline, I kind of found myself not really liking the girl that he was going to marry, and kind of being relieved, honestly, when he didn't end up with her. Newest favorite characters, probably the characters from Marvel 1602, the graphic novel by Neil Gaiman. I've only read the first one. I checked it out from my local library. I did like, most of them had very similar names. They may have been changed a little bit, but I like the different spin that they had. What we saw, what careers how would the X-Men have been treated in 1602, for example. And I thought that was interesting. A book that made you cry. This was easy. I absolutely sobbed at the ending of The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. The rest of the book wasn't fantastic, but the ending really hit me. And I just, I could barely finish it. I was crying so much. It spans across prior to her life. If you never read it, what it's about is the character Dinah. She was mentioned briefly in the Bible. She was the half sibling of Joseph. Joseph had 12 brothers and one sister. Dinah was his only sister. And in the Bible, she is assaulted by, I think it was a prince, I'm not sure, in Canaan, and he wants to marry her. But Dinah's family don't want him to, so they end up murdering a whole bunch of people there, including the prince and his family. This version told it a little bit differently. Basically, Dinah fell in love with this man, and they had an affair, and she wanted to marry him too. That's the way it was written in the book. Um, but of course she doesn't, because her family murders him and his family. So she escapes, finds out that she's pregnant with his son, and goes away to have him. And then it covers this one plot point is a very small part of it. The rest of it tells about her family's life before she was born, and then what she does after the event, all the way up until her death. Okay, so a book that made you happy, The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. This is about a woman who is on the autism spectrum and is feeling frustrated because her parents are pressuring her to get married and to have a family, and she's not very good at romantic relationships. So she hires a male escort to help teach her about relationships. The book, it just had a happy ending, and I liked the way that they tied everything up for the characters. This book wasn't perfect. I did have some thoughts about it that I was kind of like, well, this is a little ridiculous. And even I kind of felt like the way everything wrapped up at the end was like, okay, this is just too perfect. But at the same time, it is a book, it is escapism, it is a romance novel. I want for the characters to have happy endings, even if it's a little bit far-fetched. So, like I said, the way that it ended and how the characters got what they were after and made their peace with everything just really was nice. The most beautiful book you've read. The question, I think, was the most beautiful book you've received, but I haven't received or bought any books this year. Well, no, I've received a few, but none that really fell in this category. Most of the books I've read have been checked out from the library, and the most beautiful book I've checked out from the library was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. This book was kind of interesting, but I didn't really find it all that captivating, but the cover was really nice, really pretty cover. Okay, so then what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I have my to be read list on Goodreads, and I have books that I own that I would like to finish, but I don't really have any books that I set myself as a goal of reading by the end of the year. My real only goal was that I would read 42 books by the end of the year. So as long as I read 9 more books, I'm happy with it. Okay, so that is my mid-year freakout tag for July. Well, I guess it would have been June, but I was behind the times of 2021. If you want to do this yourself, go ahead and post the link to a video or a post where you've done it in the comments so I can check it out as well. Or you can answer these questions in the comments. Also, I'd love to hear what you're reading or what your reading goals are for the year. So go ahead and comment below. Tell me about what you're reading this year, or direct me to where you've done the mid-year freakout tag. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, go ahead and like it. And thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for watching.